understand that Hamlet is a drama. It was not written to be read in a classroom, actually. Don't think Shakespeare would have been happy with that. It was written for an audience. And that is a very important mechanism for you to understand when thinking about the drama. On the screen, you will see a picture of the Globe Theatre, the theatre which was Shakespeare's home, the theatre where people went to be entertained. They went for the drama of it all. It was the soap opera of the day. It was Generations, it was Isidingo, it was Sievendelon, it was everything. But there were layers in the audience, and Shakespeare was aware of that. And when you are responding to Hamlet, you need to realize that his plays were aimed at the three layers. At the top, the aristocracy, the lords, the ladies, the kings, the queens. In the middle, literally the middle. And at the bottom, the groundlings. They paid a penny and they loved the drama of it all. So from this first slide, the concept of a play being performed to an audience in a very interactive fashion. So when you are writing about the play, make sure that you talk about yourself as the audience. Never mention the reader. Shakespeare would be horrified. He wrote it for an audience. So let's go to that next slide. There are some important dramatic techniques with which you must be familiar, particularly with this play. The first one is the concept of the soliloquy. And hopefully you have heard about the soliloquy before. The character is alone on the stage, solely, S-O-L-I, and he's speaking to the audience. He is sharing his thoughts, his feelings, his fears, his frustrations with the audience. And we know that our friend Hamlet does this often, a lot. A long speech addressed to other characters on the stage is what we call the monologue, one character. And of course, if you've read your play and you understand your characters, then the character of Polonius is given to monologuing, unfortunately. One of the most important mechanisms for Hamlet, particularly in the opening lines of the play, is the aside, where quite literally he would go to the side of the stage or speak at the side of his mouth to the audience to share his thoughts with the audience. And in the beginning of this play, Hamlet is glowering in a corner, a little less kin than kind, he says to the audience, because of his fury with this Claudius, who has just turned his life completely upside down. So you do need to be familiar with those techniques, understand how Shakespeare would use them in interacting with his audience. This, of course, sets up another important concept in a Shakespearean drama, and that's the concept of dramatic irony, the tension that is created between the audience and the characters when the audience knows something that majority of characters on stage do not know, and that creates the tension. So, grade 12s, if you get a question on dramatic irony and you mention the audience, you have already engaged with that question. Please remember that. Mention the audience because they are there to create that particular brand of irony. Then obviously some important things. This is a play, so you need to understand how characters would move. Where would they move? Where would they be positioned on the stage? I want to talk particularly about the second bullet here, the types of body language. There will always be a question in the contextuals where you are asked to be a director for a moment of the play, and you are asked, how would you direct a particular character? There is a question, we're going to look at that question. But you need to practice gathering words, vocabulary, diction around describing a character's body language. Are their shoulders hunched? Are their fists clenched? Do they have their hands on their hips? And what is it telling us about how they are feeling? And we will look specifically at that issue when we get to that slide. Remember that, as in all Shakespeare plays, the plays are built on the concept of a scene, and the scenes are grouped into acts. So our word-for-word strip there shows you the different forms of the scenes, but you need to know in your heart how the scenes work in the plays and how they are matched against each other, and is there a reason for a particular scene at a particular time. I think that's also really important. One of the things that comes up in the Matric Paper is, have you differentiated in your head between the play, Hamlet, put into inverted commas, that is the title of the play, versus Hamlet, the protagonist, the main character? So if you're going to write an essay or a contextual question and you're referring to the play, you must do that with the title. Otherwise, the answers become nonsensical. Then you're saying that the person is a tragedy, which is not really what you meant at all. It's obviously really very important that you know who your main characters in the play are and who are your antagonists, who is on Hamlet's side, who is working against Hamlet. You'll see the ghost up there. Shakespeare's audience would have been fascinated with the idea of a ghost, because for them, a ghost suggested something restless, something not right. And Marcellus says something is rotten in the state of Denmark, and the ghost is an example of that. When you are looking, I have grouped the characters on the stage on the screen, for a particular reason, where Hamlet's family at the top, Hamlet's only real friend, Horatio. I have put Rosencrantz and Guildenstern into red because they betray Hamlet in the worst possible way. They betray his friendship and they betray his trust. There are also, grade 12 learners, many parallels in your dramatis personae with the father-son relationships. So the ghost and Hamlet, Claudius and Hamlet. You have Polonius and Laertes, and of course Fortinbras defending the memory of his father. So you need to think of these as people. This is family politics that's going on in this play, and they all knock and reverberate off each other. What you will notice on this particular slide is the two ladies. There are only two, Gertrude and Ophelia. And it is really important when you are studying this play and revising the play to think of the fact that I have presented quite literally in coloured formation a patriarchal society. And you will be expected to be able to understand and write about a male-dominated society, a patriarchy where women have a particular role to play and have particular responsibilities. One of the questions that is often asked is, Ophelia, what happens to Ophelia? What drives Ophelia to her totally detached state? And to what extent is Hamlet responsible for what happens to Ophelia? So you need to look at the woman. You need to consider Gertrude. Gertrude is an interesting character. Does she marry Claudius out of lust? Does she marry Claudius because her position as queen is then guaranteed? Is she just very shrewd? There are so many debates that you can have around the character of Gertrude. But the two ladies are really important in this exercise. It is also a tragic play. It's a tragedy. You need to please make sure that you understand that it is a tragedy, that he is a tragic hero, that he's undone by his hubris, his hamartia. If you're not familiar with these terms, you need to take them back to your teachers and explore them and find out more. But hamartia particularly is your inability to make the right judgment, or something which is preventing you from making the right judgment or doing the right thing. Something which is, your character is flawed, it's hurting your character. I think you know by now that Hamlet procrastinates. We all procrastinate. But why does Hamlet procrastinate? What is it that is making him do it, and how is it affecting everything that he does? But if you write an entire essay without mentioning the fact that this is a tragedy, he is a tragic hero, then you haven't really grasped the genre of this play. It is a tragedy. It's about a great man with great potential who is driven to his own destruction by circumstances which are partially within his control and partially not. Internal conflict, external conflict. So lots to think about with the character of Hamlet. The definition of tragedy is there from Aristotle. It depicts the downfall of basically a good person through some error or misjudgment, producing suffering and insight on the part of the protagonist, which Hamlet does experience, and arousing pity and fear on the part of the audience. And I wanted to show you that slide particularly because one of the questions that was asked at the end of 2018 was, to what extent does the audience feel pity for Hamlet? So it is something for you to consider in your understanding of exactly what a tragic play is all about. In your telematics booklet is a set of questions from a previous exam paper, which I'm going to talk about now. You do have the NSC memorandum, which follows the questions, which it would be good for you to actually go through that. But what I really want to focus on with you now is, what do you need to know? What are these questions expecting of you, and what is so important about your preparations? And I think primarily, mainly, you need to know the plot, and you need to know the subplot. Plot knowledge is absolutely essential. And unfortunately, the filmed versions do not necessarily present the plot in the right order sometimes, or there's essential information that's missing. So you need to know the sequence of events in order to deal with the questions, in order to write a fluent essay. And before I look specifically at the questions, there is a technique which we call PEEL. P-E-E-L. Now, in the essay, the L comes into play, but in the contextual questions, it's the first three. And all the questions that you get, except for the last one, are worth 3 marks each. Now, what we find when we mark your papers at the end of the year is that often you might get 2, but not 3. And the third mark comes with the second E. So the first point, P for point. What is the point? What is your answer? What are you saying? What point are you making? The first E is for your evidence. So if you're making a point, what's backing that up? What is your evidence? And your second E is your explanation. And if you can get yourself to that point, you will find that you will get to the third mark, because you are then discussing. It is that second E which gets you to the point of discussion, which is important. So question 11.1 in the telematics booklet says, refer to line 5 of Act 1, Scene 5, but you'll be secret. Account for Hamlet's concern with secrecy at this point in the play. Now, if you look in the telematics booklet, you will see that the examiners will always tell you from which scene the extract is taken. So I go back to my point, which says, know your sequence of events, because the entry-level question, the first question, will expect you to be able to position that question in its sequence. So you will notice at this point in the play, right? So you need to know what is happening at this point in the play. And obviously, Hamlet has seen the ghost. Hamlet is concerned about the motives of the ghost. He wants to keep it secret because he needs to validate the ghost. Is this a real ghost, or is it a bad ghost? Is it something that's trying to trick him? Concern for secrecy at this point in the play. And that's coming up more and more. 11.2, explain the ghost's motive in approaching Hamlet. Now, again, you need to be familiar with these sorts of words. What is a motive? Do you understand the concept of a motive? And if you look carefully at Hamlet and go to each character and say to yourself, do these characters have motives? Are they ulterior motives? Are they pure motives? Polonius's motives are not pure. They are not, nor are Claudius's motives. So you need to understand the motives and the ghost's motive. So at the bottom of the slide, you will see references to the things, further concepts with which you need to be familiar. And obviously the major themes in this play, you must be familiar with the themes because the themes are built into the question. So the concept of revenge, the ghost wants revenge. That's not difficult to discuss. Where's the evidence? How would you explain that? And then obviously characterization. Now, remember, Shakespeare's characters are real people. They're interacting with each other. I want to give you 3 concepts to think about when looking at characterization. And it helps you to see and understand their motives. So, what are their actions? What do they do? What are their reactions to situations? Think of Claudius and the play within the play. What are their interactions? How do they interact with people? You know, Polonius is different with different people. And Hamlet pokes fun at him in the play and shows just how hypocritical and obsequious he can be to a point of being nauseating, actually. Actions, reactions, interactions. This is a drama. I must repeat that. These are people. This is politics on the Shakespeare stage. Question 11.3. Before we go on to that, we talk about an arc of tension in a Shakespeare play. The arc of tension is basically what I call the shape of the play. Now, what do I mean by the shape of a play? Shakespeare's plays will always have 5 acts, always. The turning point or the crux or the point of no return in the plays is somewhere in the middle of the 3rd act. That is the turning point. That's the pivot. So go into this play and draw it. If you're a visual learner, go and draw it. Draw your arc. What happens in Act 1? What happens in Act 2? What turns the play on its head in Act 3? Where's the climax? And then how does it work out to the end of Act 5? Of course, the resolution of a Shakespearean tragedy is always death, and obviously the main character as well. But in Hamlet, so many unnecessary deaths happen as a result of everything that plays itself out. So look at the sequencing of events. Look at the scenes where the ghost appears. That's important because it informs Hamlet's reactions and then his interactions. So that's what you should be looking at in that case. Question 11.3 is the question I alluded to earlier. Discuss the extent to which it would be justifiable for the audience to pity Hamlet. You see again, at this point in the play. That's why I'm emphasizing know the sequence of events. Understand the reactions of the audience. Now, if you can justify something, you can see a reason for it. You can see an end point. So can they feel sorry for him? Can they feel pity for them? And if so, why? When you see a question which asks you to discuss the extent to which something is possible, then look at three things. It's either not at all, or partially, or completely. Now, candidates have argued partially and completely. I don't think you can argue not at all in this case, but certainly there is something in Hamlet that the audience must pity. He's placed in an absolutely untenable position by the ghost, who is forcing him to question everything that he's learned, everything that is important to him, his theological training. He's got this moral dilemma that the ghost has placed in front of him. And for him, he's an intelligent young man. He's sensitive. He's a deep thinker. This is difficult for him to understand. Can you see? These are humans. You must think of them as people in a context of your play. Referring to line 26 is the question about Hamlet's antic disposition. Now, I'm hoping that at this stage you are clear that the antic disposition is his decision to pretend to be mad, to pretend to be mad. There's a line of thinking which says Hamlet goes mad. No. Hamlet feigns madness. The real madness in this play is Ophelia, not Hamlet. Hamlet feigns madness. He puts it on. It becomes something behind which he can hide in order to see people's reactions and to set up once again other people's reactions. Again, it's not about his madness. It's his antic disposition. And he fools a number of characters, including Polonius. So you can see again themes here that are coming up through the play. Putting on appearances, deception, treacherous behavior, killing a king, killing your own brother. Goodness, that's quite severe. And then 11.5 is a question about Gertrude. And again, I pointed out earlier how important it is for you to know the two ladies, Gertrude and Ophelia. Notice it's talking about later actions. So once again, what are her actions? Take Gertrude and look at what she does. Look at her actions throughout the play. And how does she bring the truth to the statement? What does she do to validate the statement? So if you're not sure about words such as justify or validate or what is valid, then you need to make sure that you go look it up and come to terms with it, because it is the buzzword at the moment is the word valid. Is a statement valid? Is a character's actions valid? Can they be proved? Have they got authority? If you think of a valid license or something, put it in your own context so that you can really understand that. And then the other question, Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended, comment on the irony of Gertrude's words. And obviously, again, you need to know what Gertrude's words are to understand the concept of irony in the play, and think about the hypocrisy here of whose father is she actually talking about. You've really got to get into this concept of Hamlet's actual father and the man who has stolen the fatherhood away from Hamlet himself. One of the final questions in the contextual is around the question of visualization. And again, I'll go back to where I started. You are the audience. Visualize it. Visualize the stage. Imagine what the actors would look like. Could you cast Hamlet now? Could you take modern actors and actresses and put them into the roles? Because if you can, you've really understood the play. You've understood. Can you see even members of your community in these roles? And then it becomes alive and it lives and you can talk about it. So the question that they're always going to ask you is, using this extract as a starting point, always, they will do that. And then they will say, referring to particular lines, which is the point in the play, if you were the director of a production of Hamlet, how would you instruct the actor or actress to deliver these lines? Now, grade 12s, this is a 3-mark question, which I said to you at the beginning. Your 3 marks are for the body language of your actor or actress, the tone adopted by that actor or actress, and then the motivation for your answer, the justification. So 1 mark for body language, 1 mark for tone, 1 mark for motivation. And you will only get the 3 if you can do that. At this point, may I just say to you that there is a difference between the tone of a voice and the pitch of a voice. They are not the same. We find increasingly that candidates are writing about a loud tone. No, that's the pitch. That's the level of the voice. It's not the tone. So if you do not have a collection of words to describe a person's tone of voice, I strongly recommend that you go and look up and find, in the telematics booklet, there is some help around this issue, that you equip yourself to be able to talk about tone and not confuse it with pitch, and also have some standards for body language. A couple of years ago, we asked a question about Hamlet in relation to Gertrude in her closet, and we asked to illustrate the answer, and one candidate did. He drew, which is not right. So also, as I come to a close, just make sure that you are familiar with what we call the direction words. If you ask to discuss or to comment on or to explain, make sure you are fully familiar with what those words actually mean. The last question is the 4-mark question in the contextual, using this extract as a starting point and drawing on your knowledge of the play as a whole. Critically comment on the nature of betrayal as presented in the play. So can you see? The plot is knowledge of the play as a whole, starting at this point. Okay? The characterization is in the nature of betrayal. People betray each other. So who betrays in their actions and reactions? And then obviously as presented in the play. And there again, this idea of betrayal as a theme in the play. And it is multi-layered, the idea of betrayal. And it's a 4-mark question. I would strongly recommend that you go into the telematics booklet to the memorandum for question 4, because it's very clearly laid out as to where your 4 marks lie. I'm going to hand over now to Mr. Geordie, who is going to take you through the very, very important process of writing the literary essay. Please remember that you must write an essay. Whether you do it for your drama or for your novel is not important, but you must write an essay. So many of the techniques with which Mr. Geordie is going to share with you now will be applicable to your writing of the literature essay in any of the genres. It is a really important tool. I'm handing over to Mr. Geordie.
And thank you very much. And good afternoon again, everyone. As Mrs. Mallon has mentioned, I'm going to be talking about writing an essay question, a literature essay, with particular focus this afternoon on the play Hamlet. First of all, I want to talk about our approach to writing a literature essay, and just to remind you that what I'm talking about this afternoon, this could actually relate to any piece of literature that one is studying. For our purposes, however, we'll be looking at this approach with regard to Shakespeare's Hamlet. My first 2 slides consider the question quite broadly, not only in terms of writing an essay for an exam, but maybe as part of your school-based assessment in the course of the year. So when you are writing the essay and how much time you have obviously affects your approach to the task. And time management, as with much of your homework, is a key factor. Likewise, if you're preparing for an exam, adequate preparation, putting the time aside, is essential. You must know the basics of the plot, among many other things, prior to setting about writing the essay. So consider and understand the topic. Look for relevant sections in your set workbook. This is if it is a homework assignment. Make notes, discuss the topic with your teacher and your peers, and then go on to complete a rough draft of the essay, rewrite it, and improve it. That discussing the topic with your teacher and your peers, although you won't be able to do that in an examination, for a homework assessment, I think that is really important. Not necessarily to steal ideas from someone else, but simply that through discussing it, you are thinking more about it. You are giving time to it, you're giving attention to it, and perhaps certain ideas that you hadn't thought of previously will occur to you. In an examination, obviously, you are not likely to have time to produce more than one draft. So you need to be efficient with your use of time in an exam. Where should you write it? Well, again, in an exam, you have no choice. You will be in the exam venue. But if it is an assignment you're doing in the course of the year, you need to set about minimizing the distractions around you. Have what you need beforehand, your play, your notes, your other resources, a pen and paper, a computer, if you have one, and access to the internet can certainly help. But if you are drawing on other sources of information, remember that you need to acknowledge your sources. For the rest of this discussion, I'll be limiting myself to focusing on writing the essay in exam circumstances. So we're talking about writing paper 2 at the end of the year and how you go about choosing to write the Hamlet essay and then producing a good essay in response to the topic. Obviously, you do need to do the necessary revision beforehand. You need to know the text well. That means you should have read the text more than once. You do not need to know scenes off by heart. We're not talking about extreme lengths that you need to go to, but you need to be familiar with the text, and you need to be familiar with the details of the story and the plot. Spend time thinking and talking about it. Part of your revision can actually be meeting with a group of your peers and talking through the play, exchanging ideas. Know the plot, know the characters, know the themes. Your teacher, hopefully, has given you good preparation with regard to the themes of the play, but you too can do more research in that regard. You can acquaint yourself with the themes of the play and do some detailed preparation in that regard. You cannot hope to write a good essay if you do not at least know the basics. You need to know how to spell Claudius. You need to know the name of the castle. You need to know the name of the university that Hamlet and Horatio have been studying at. These are basic elements that you should know. Then, when you are reading through the paper, you will obviously encounter a Hamlet essay question and an essay question based on the novel that you have studied. You need to pick the right question for you. Personally, I don't believe in deciding before the examination which essay you're going to write. A lot will depend on the day, on the paper itself, and your comprehension of the two topics and which you feel most comfortable with writing. So look closely at how the question is worded. I'm going to talk more in a moment about the instruction words and the key words, and I'll show you an example. But the wording of a question is important. Don't just automatically assume, oh, I know what this is about. This is about madness, or this is about revenge, or this is about the role of women in the play. Yes, it might be, but look at the details of how the question is worded. The instruction words, they tell you what to do. For example, it might say discuss, or account for, which means give reasons for or explain. It might say compare, or compare and contrast. And then there are key words, which we can also refer to as the content words, which indicate what you should cover in the essay. Let's look at an example. So here I have an essay question, which was presented to the students at my school as one of several that they could choose from. And typically it deals with a theme that is often discussed in Hamlet, which is the theme of revenge. But let's look at the exact wording. It says here, the theme of revenge is undeniably present in Hamlet. Its expression, however, takes different forms and achieves different results. By focusing on the two young men for whom revenge is important, discuss how they differ both in the expression and the achievement of revenge. Now, don't be put off by words like forms and expression, right? If you take it slowly and you think it through, this should all make sense to you. Now, let's look. I'm going to move on to the next slide and have a look at the instruction words, okay, and the key words. Here we go. Unfortunately, that dark blue looks very similar to the black, but I hope that you can see it. If I focus firstly on the content or keywords, the words that I've got in dark blue there are revenge and Hamlet, different forms, different results, two young men, expression, and achievement of revenge. So this is about revenge, and revenge being shown in different forms. Part of what I would do is start paraphrasing that, putting it into my own words. So it's about revenge being shown in different ways, different expressions of revenge, so different ways in which the revenge is carried out. Achievement of revenge, so does the person who is seeking revenge achieve their goal? Do they get the vengeance that they want or not? Two young men. Now again, this is where I come back to knowing the basics. If I'm sitting in the exam and I see two young men and I don't know who that refers to, then I haven't done my basic preparation. But those who have prepared themselves well know immediately, yes, that is Hamlet and Laertes. They are the two young men in the play who are both seeking revenge. The red words here are the instruction words. So the first one there says focusing. That part of the instruction is guiding my attention. It's saying, in a sense, there's a whole lot more than that you can simply ignore. All that you need to do for this essay is to zoom in and to focus on Hamlet and Laertes. And then the second set of instruction words there, discuss how they differ. There might be similarities, and sure, certainly I can draw attention to some of the similarities, but the question is essentially telling me that there are many differences, and I need to point out what those differences are between Hamlet and Laertes in my essay. Moving on to preparation and planning. The first thing is to get some ideas down on paper. Now, hopefully, in preparation for this exam, you will have looked at the total amount of time available to you, and you would have done some basic sums as to how much time you're going to spend on poetry, how much time on the novel, and how much time on the drama. Certainly set aside some time to jot down some ideas on paper. Now, this might, for you, it might be a list of points. For someone else, it might be a mind map. You see what technique works best for you. In my opinion and in my experience, one idea leads to another. So as you start getting your ideas down on paper, the one idea is linked to another, and another one follows, and another one follows, and soon you've got a collection of ideas down on paper, and you're feeling better about yourself. You're feeling more confident and ready to tackle the task because you've got some ideas down on paper that you can work with when you come to writing your essay. Also, what I find is that once you put those ideas down on paper, often new insights spring to mind. So a new insight might come to you as you are jotting down the things that you have revised and remembered. Obviously, make sure that your points are relevant to the topic. As you review the points that you've jotted down, are you sure that they are focused on the two young men and their desire for revenge? Then start looking for the connections between your points. In other words, certain points belong together, and certain points might contrast with each other. If I was doing some brainstorming around this topic, I might say, okay, well, Hamlet is, Linda used the word procrastinate recently. Hamlet delays in his course of action. And in contrast with that, Laertes is a man who actually could have forged ahead and killed the person he thought was responsible very quickly. So that might be a point of contrast, and in my planning, I could indicate that those 2 points contrast with each other. Have relevant quotations to support your main points. Now, again, I'm not saying that you have learnt the script off by heart, but there will be certain parts of the script that have stuck in your mind. Perhaps the one mentioned earlier on. There is something rotten in the state of Denmark. Maybe that one comes to your mind. or something else, and you jot that down. You don't contrive your essay to include that quotation, but if it's relevant, you think, aha, this will be really nice to use in my essay, and it will help support my argument. And have a plan in mind. When you look at these points that you have jotted down, maybe use some numbers alongside, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, to give you a rough idea of the sequence in which you will address these points. Essentially, you're mapping out how your essay will develop. And that is very reassuring as you embark on writing your essay. Now, I've changed the font here to suggest handwriting, and this is rather detailed. I don't think in an exam I would necessarily write each point in as much detail. But what I've got there is a list of points that someone might list before they write an essay. I'm not going to read them all through, but for example, if we look at the top there, it says the main theme of the play is revenge. Further down, I've got H and L, standing for Hamlet and Laertes, both seek to avenge their father's death, kill the murderer. Then an insight occurs to me as I'm jotting things down. Hamlet is both an avenger and a murderer. He is present in both plots, in a sense. Right? He is seeking vengeance for his father's death, and because he killed Polonius, Laertes is seeking vengeance for his father's death. And so it continues. And if you look further down the list, you can see I'm starting to contrast Hamlet and Laertes. Then I need to get busy with the business of actually writing the essay. And my first step is to write an introduction to the essay, and an introduction which clearly introduces what the essay is about. Now, when writing an introduction, consider that introduction as being useful to both you and the reader. The introduction should help you to clarify what you need to focus on in the essay. Again, it gives you some reassurance that you're on the right track, that you know what you're doing, you're putting the foundation stone in place. The introduction also tells the reader what the essay is going to be about and how your essay will develop. So perhaps you should try to include certain key words in your introduction that link up to paragraphs that are going to come later in your essay. Again, your introduction should be clear and concise. Don't ramble on for half a page. Okay? It's not meant to be too detailed. It's not meant to be too long. If you find yourself getting into the nitty-gritty of analysis, okay, you should have included a paragraph break earlier on. Here is a topic, and if you have a look at the whiteboard for the moment, I'm going to show you how I would go about looking at the content words and the instruction words. Here I have it in front of me. Is the madness in Hamlet real or a pretense? Straightforward question. Instruction, discuss this question with reference to scenes and characters in the play. This is a bit simpler, I think, than the wording of the previous one, but first of all, I'm going to look for some keywords or content words. Okay, madness is clearly a key word. We might overlook it, but the name of the play, okay, is obviously crucial. And then I've got real and pretense, and clearly those two words contrast with each other. Is it genuine, okay, or is he pretending? Madness. Discuss this question with reference to scenes and characters in the play. So I've been given specific guidance there as to where to focus. If I look at my instruction words, I've got this one over here, discuss, which is quite general and broad. It gives me ample scope to explore the question, and an instruction to refer, to make sure that in the course of this essay I look at both scenes and characters in the play. Coming back to an example of an introduction I have here, madness is an important theme to consider in William Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet. It is of great relevance in relation to certain characters, such as Hamlet and Ophelia, and key scenes in the play. The question arises, however, as to whether the madness in this play is real or simply a pretense and appearance of insanity. Now, that is an example of an introduction, and you can see in various ways how it links back to the topic. Hamlet and Ophelia are mentioned as two characters, and the question of whether it is real or not is also suggested. Writing the essay, you need to then move on to the body of your essay, and the body of your essay will be made up of several paragraphs. Don't think of it as one long paragraph just because we use the word body, right? It is divided into several paragraphs, and it is very annoying for teachers and examiners when they need to read an essay that has been written for marks, and it's incredibly off-putting just to see a whole page without paragraph breaks. And it might, let's say, dispose the marker against you. Hopefully they are professional enough to ignore that, but it's not going to do you any favors. So form each paragraph around one of the main points that you wish to focus on. State the point clearly. Use a topic sentence. That is usually a short, clear statement, usually at the beginning of a paragraph, that indicates to the reader what the main point of this paragraph is going to be. Then support the point with relevant evidence from the play and go into more detail where relevant. Now you need to start arranging your paragraphs in logical order, and hopefully you've done some of this planning beforehand in your rough work. So you think, okay, I've done that, that's paragraph 1, now I can move on to my next point of argument in paragraph 2, and so forth. You may express opinion, but remember that you also need to substantiate opinion with reference to the text, and you need to avoid saying, I think, I feel, in my opinion, and so forth. And please write in the present tense. Okay, treat the actions or the events of the play as if they are ever present, and be consistent in that. Even if you make the mistake of writing in the past, be consistent with that. Don't chop and change back and forth between the present and the past. But full marks for writing in the present tense and sticking to that in the way that you narrate the events of the play. What to avoid? Please avoid retelling the story. This is a clear sign that the person does not really understand the topic or what they need to focus on. And in the absence of being able to present an interpretation or an argument, they're lapsing back into storytelling. That's not the point of the essay. And the examiner knows the story well enough and hopes that you do too, but it's not your job to tell the whole story. Don't write about the film version of the play. That's not relevant to your assignment either. Your focus is the play and not the film. In fact, the film can become a source of confusion to you. Right? So if you have watched the film or various versions of the film, go back to the play and make sure that the play is clear in your mind. It may also suggest to the examiner that you haven't read the book or read the play. Avoid padding and waffling. Padding is when you make something look bigger, you puff it up, all right? And waffling is when you go off on the wrong track or on stuff that is vague and not relevant. So avoid irrelevant material and avoid too much material, and keep the word limit in mind. Remember again to write, that's something to avoid, writing in the first person. Here is an example. I'm going to skip through this, but it is an example of a paragraph from an essay, and there's a topic sentence there. Hamlet's madness, according to him, is not real madness. Conclusion, before the conclusion, the logical transition, so you need to be able to move smoothly from one paragraph to another. And words like in addition, furthermore, however, firstly, secondly, similarly, thus, etc., those can help give a kind of a glue, in a sense, cohesion to your essay. So become familiar with using words such as those. When you write your conclusion, you are recapping your argument. You are putting it in a nutshell, the main points that you have made in the course of your essay. It is not a time to introduce new information. You're not going for a climax. You're not going for a dramatic effect, so avoid that. And don't end your essay with a rhetorical question, please. Try to find a suitable, strong statement that is relevant to what you have said to conclude your essay. Again, here is an example of a conclusion, but given our time at the moment, I'm not going to read through all of this. You don't have to start with words like in conclusion or to conclude, but that is a possible way of starting the final paragraph. A checklist for at the end. You need to set aside some time, hopefully, to reread and to edit and polish your essay. Check that you have always underlined or put in inverted commas the title of the play. Check that you've got the spelling of names and places correct and that you've used the right terminology. You're referring to the audience, not the reader in this case. You're referring to scenes and acts. Remove anything that's vague. And also when you read it something for the second or the third time, something that's ambiguous might jump out at you. So try to remove any ambiguity. Avoid slang, like referring to the ghost as Hamlet's old man, for example, and colloquialisms. And avoid putting yourself in the foreground with I think and I feel. Remember, the style in which you're writing is formal and academic. It's not personal and it's not emotive. Finally, let me say here, take the time to improve your work. So this comes back to time management and planning, because taking that time, either in the preparation or in the revision of your work, will help you improve your mark. Well, that's all from my side, Linda. Is there anything you would like to add there?
Just a couple of things to add. On the front of the exam paper, I did say this in an earlier presentation, but the DBE is no longer putting the numbers of the questions on the front of the answer book for you to circle your choices. You are required to write the questions that you have answered on the front cover. Please do that accurately. It does cause confusion for checkers and markers when it's not done. Then on your question paper, there are some guidelines as to the time that you can spend on a particular question. So they allocate a suggested 40 minutes for the poetry and then 55 minutes for the drama and the novel. So in your preparation, you can perhaps practice what Mr. Geordie has said and practice getting your essay in to that time frame, that 55 minutes. But we would like to wish you all the very best and hope that you have benefited from this presentation. A very good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon.